Hey, well, I guess I'm live now. So, welcome to my page. So, I am live streaming this not only on my Facebook page but also my page on YouTube. So, if you can't watch on one, feel free to tap on over and watch the other. Excuse me just a second while I get this set up here. Um, so. Many of you that don't know me, my name is Jerry James of Dubtown Bullies in Oklahoma. And what I wanted to do this evening was I talk about what's up, Jesse? Talk about breeding a lot, kind of here and there, all in one piece. But um, um, what I wanted to do tonight was kind of, to be honest, I kind of just wanted to cover it all. You know, I help a lot of people by doing coefficient of inbreeding analysis and things like that. We talk about a lot of details and stuff. And I figured I would just, I figured I'd just take a little bit and I kind of go over everything for those that want to know the things that I think about uh, when I'm planning on doing a breeding. And they may or may not jive with what you plan. Uh, doing, and you may or you may not agree, and that's fine. Um, but anyway, so we'll get on with it. Um, so one of the first questions I always ask is, when you're doing the breeding, what are you trying to accomplish? Uh, are you trying to lay a foundation of females, for instance, to carry your program forward? To set it up for several years. Are you wanting to, have those females, be line bred so they're genetically more predisposed to reproduce themselves more consistently? Are you just looking, to capitalize on a popular stud, and maybe that stud has a higher inbreeding coefficient, and maybe you really want the pups to look more like him, so you need to take into consideration inbreeding coefficient of your females. you know what are you trying to accomplish? Okay. Are you breeding for something that you want to keep? Are you breeding for something that you want to sell, or both? uh, which is typically the case, uh, but not always. And are you breeding for, what market are you breeding for? Are you breeding for, are you breeding show dogs? Are you trying to, produce high quality dogs like that? Or are you, are you a breeder's breeder? You're breeding more for breeding stock, or you're breeding for, some people do breed, just for pets. And look, every, show dogs make great pets too. I don't mean to imply that, but um, so there are a lot of factors to consider. So I kind of always ask that question first. Well, what are you trying to do, right? The other thing to consider is, are you trying to, you're trying to get a good stud for your program out of that breeding, right? If you're trying to get a good stud out of that program, then your approach may be a little bit different. Um, Studs can impact your program um, for a longer period of time than one particular female may. And even though studs get a lot of the limelight and a lot of the credit, females, you know, females carry equally as much weight as anything else. How to get them to look more like the stud, show quality. What's up, King Bred Bully? Melanie Anderson. All right, how to get them to look more like the stud, show quality. All right, so before we talk about inbreeding, coefficients, how to do it, things like that. First thing I want to talk about is the most important. After you've answered that first question, what are you trying to do? All right. The next thing that's important, right, is honestly, are the two dogs in front of you? Okay, that's the most important part. Do they complement one another? If I've got a female that's got a rear end with poor angulation, then but she's really good everywhere else, then I've got to find a stud that is not only equal to her in every uh in every other area possibly, but that definitely has the rear angulation that you're looking for. But the important thing, okay, is that they have similar phenotypes, meaning similar in size, okay, not drastically different, similar head shape, similar physical attributes. So if uh your outcome when you have similar phenotypes is going to be a more consistent dog regardless of the inbreeding coefficient, if you follow what I'm saying. Inbreeding coefficients are important, but they're not everything. But if you have consistent similar phenotypes, you'll end up with a fairly consistent litter of puppies. Okay, in terms of how they're gonna fit. And so when I look for uh, a prospective stud, if you will, for my females, the first thing I do is I evaluate and I break down my female and I say, where is she lacking? Okay. And then I start looking for studs that I like that have those attributes that she lacks. Okay. Now, when I find those studs, then the next thing I do is then I put that stud in. Now, this is where me having this stuff benefits me, but I put that information in my software and I make sure that my inbreeding coefficient is not out of bounds. Okay. So for me personally, an inbreeding coefficient of more than 20% is going to be too high for me. And let me explain to you why. I've explained this before, but I'll explain it here. Um, Research and science, and I talk a lot about science, but science has said that inbreeding coefficients, what's up, Christopher? Inbreeding coefficients higher than 10% are dangerous. Okay. It's called the extinction vortex, if you will, that basically says if you breed that way, in terms of a genetic population, you get to a point where you have nowhere to go. Okay. And then the breed basically collapses in on itself. All right. They recommend inbreeding coefficients of 5% or below. All right. Now, science doesn't have to. They're concerned about population genetics. They're not concerned about what the dog looks like so much. It's a dog, right? In their eyes, okay. But as breeders, we have things that we want to accomplish. We're breeding for show dogs. We're breeding for certain attributes or whatever, right? So we have to balance the two between health, genetic health, and what we want the dogs to look like. Okay. And so think of inbreeding coefficients as simply a measurement of risk. The higher inbreeding coefficient is, the more risk I take with the dog caring or where recessive traits come out and are expressed, right? And so, what we want to do is we want to minimize the risk. At the same time, we want to take advantage of the things that a higher inbreeding coefficient brings to us, which is more consistent phenotypical expression. Okay. So when I used to breed horses 25 years ago, when I first started out, I talked to a gentleman that was the head of a university horse breeding program, and he told me that they like to keep their inbreeding coefficient between 12 to 14%. Now, I can tell you that their horses were extremely consistent in terms of look, in terms of phenotype. I mean, just very, very consistent. Okay. Um, so that kind of stuck in my head, of course. And then me personally, look, I'm willing to go up to 20%. I mean, I see, I do all these analysis and everything, and I see inbreeding coefficients ridiculous, ridiculous high. I'm not willing to take that much risk. Um, and Embark did a recent study that also said that for every 10% increase in the inbreeding coefficient equates a one pup reduction in terms of litter size. So if you factor that in, difference between a an inbreeding coefficient female of 10% and 40% is three pups per litter. And three pups per litter, three litters, nine pups, say $3,000 a pup, you've lost $27,000 over the breeding life of that female with a higher inbreeding coefficient on your females. And here's the simple reality of it is that females with higher inbreeding coefficients have more trouble getting pregnant, right? Have more breeding issues. So it just doesn't serve, right, to there's a time and a place to utilize a dog that has a high inbreeding coefficient. Okay. And there's a time and a place not to. All right. Um, so inbreeding coefficients. So what I was talking about is I look at my female, I look at the male, then I run the male through the software. Depending on the outcome of the analysis when I get done with it, I will either put that stud in uh, my probable file, or I will exclude it based on the inbreeding coefficient. Then what I'll do is I'll go look at that stud's litter mates. I'll go look at offspring if he's had offspring, that kind of stuff, and take a look at what that stud is producing. Is that stud a champion, a grand champion? Has he been, and some people may say, well, there's no value in show dogs and things like that. And look, if you have a champion or a grand champion dog, that dog has been in front of multiple judges. Now, you could take that for whatever it's worth, but I believe ABKC has a lot of knowledgeable judges. Now, I don't know about the other registries. I've not shown in any other registries, but percentages are in your favor that by the time you have a grand champion dog, that dog has been seen by a lot of judges, been awarded by a lot of judges, and then not only that, has had 5 champion class wins under 4 different judges, right? And so, um, now again, that champion or grand champion dog may still not have the traits that you desire for your female. Okay, so you've got to make you got to make those judgments, right? But that's kind of how I do it, right? And then once once I look at the litter mates, once I look at the offspring and everything, then I go, okay, then that's a stud that I'm definitely going to consider. The other thing that I do is then I model the pup. So when I select the stud and everything, I look at the inbreeding coefficient, what the line breeding was, you know, you know, um, for me, I'll just say, okay, two, really three lines I'm kind of mixing and line breeding, right? Waffle House Bistro and what and edge gaudy stuff like old Blue Force stuff, right? So those are the dogs that I like. Those are the things that I'm kind of going to be weaving in and out of my program. So those are the dogs that I'm interested in, right? And so studs that I choose, studs that I'm looking for, that kind of thing. Those are going to be those studs. Okay. um, so they just kind of have they just kind of have to be along those lines. Yours are going to be different, obviously, but doing the inbreeding coefficient helps eliminate or vet out, certain dogs that may or may not fit your program. And again, everybody has a different risk tolerance. Okay, that how high they want to go, maybe 30%, maybe whatever. All right. So we've settled on that, and we say, okay, this potential stud is good. All right. So let's talk about so let's say my female has an inbreeding coefficient of 18%, and I don't really want to go up any higher. Okay. So what do I do? How do I breed her? Okay. So your female is going to be fairly um I'll say no, dominant's not the right word, but she's going to have strong influences in what those puppies look like based on her inbreeding coefficient. Okay, so you got a female at 18%. You need to find a stud that has a higher inbreeding coefficient than what she does if you want the puppies to more resemble the stud than you do the female. Okay, and then what you need to do is that dog, say let's just say this, I had a female that's 18%, right? I might go find me a stud that's got an inbreeding coefficient of 25 or 30%, but completely different bloodlines, right? Because what I need to do is I need to outcross, right? I need to outcross on that female. But when you outcross, make sure that you outcross to a dog that is also has a well structured pedigree, so you can fairly rely on the outcome of, you know, if you're breeding to that dog, then you want the traits and stuff of that dog, right? So, um, by higher inbreeding coefficient, you hedge your bets uh, more. And so, but you make sure that you breed to a dog that has a higher inbreeding coefficient. Conversely, if you really, really like your female and you want those puppies to look like your female, what you can do is you can go breed to a stud that whose phenotype matches your female, or his attributes make up for her weak points. Okay, but he's equal in the other areas, but that he has a lower inbreeding coefficient than what she does. Okay, and so she's most likely going to dominate the breeding. So then you breed to him again from a different bloodline. She's at 18%. You don't want to stay within the same bloodlines of what she has. Okay. So you go, um, you know, you go someplace different. Uh, I'm not sure how my comments. Tell me if you're seeing my comments. Let's see. Somebody send me a message. Christopher, are you still on? Now, my comments. Are you guys seeing when I comment back? I said, "Hey, Christopher." Uh, okay, you saw it. Did you see, Christopher? Did you see when I said, "Hey, Christopher"? Because this is new for me. Using StreamYard to multi-platform. And so when I said, "Hey, Christopher," it showed the YouTube logo and not Facebook. So I want to make sure you're seeing the answer to my comment. So please just confirm that you saw me say, "Hey, Christopher," or give me a thumbs up or something. Okay, good. Good. Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate that. So you don't see what, Marquise? Let me check out Mark. Uh, Marquise, do you see me? I said hi, Ramos. Tell me if you see. Tell me if you saw that. Okay, so it's not showing. So I apologize. It's not showing my replies to you guys' comments, but I will address them. Okay. All right, so let's get back to the high inbreeding coefficient female and what you do. If you really like your female, right? So then, like I said, you go find you a male that has a lower inbreeding coefficient with bloodlines that you like, but that are dissimilar from hers. Okay, and go breed to him. All right. This might be a good opportunity for a dog that, for the lack of a better word, is scatterbred. Okay. If it's, but here's the important part: a dog can be scatterbred but still have a very nice phenotype, right? Some people don't always, when they breed dogs, they don't know, they don't understand, they don't line breed, they don't know how to structure a pedigree, with, you know, with considering phenotype as well. So they just look at a dog, that they like, that they think will go well with a female without regard so much to the bloodlines. So you end up with a quality scatterbred dog. Okay. There's nothing wrong. And I know some people may disagree with me here, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with breeding to a scatterbred dog as long as, and let's say in this case it's a stud, as long as you're wanting the offspring to resemble the female. Okay. Your higher inbreeding coefficient female. Okay. Um, Honestly, that's what you want. Okay. Because here's what a scatterbred dog does for your program: brings in a lot more genetic variability and creates what they call hybrid vigor. Okay, increased size, increased health, increased stamina. There's just a lot. There's an influx. Think of it as what would they call it? An IV of a bunch of new genetic material. Okay, and so now you've got almost, I want to call it, not really a fresh start, right? But you got all this new juice that came in, right? So now you got these puppies that got mom over here with well structured pedigree and everything. But now what you've done is you've brought the inbreeding coefficient down. Don't know what that number is really without doing it right. So you brought the inbreeding coefficient back down. Okay. So then when those puppies grow up, then what you can do is you can go back and you can line breed to the mamas to the mama's side of the bloodlines, right? So then you can go back to line breeding, but you've got all that fresh genetic material. Okay. So you can line breed, you can probably line breed a couple of times before you have to go back out again. Uh Yeah, Cheyenne. Uh, so a way to think about that is the higher inbreeding coefficient of a dog, okay, the more likelihood that dog is to pass on its genetic traits. But also the more likelihood that dog is to pass on its negative genetic traits as well. Okay. So hey, it's a balancing act, right? But there is a term called inbreeding depression. As you inbreed, the more you inbreed, the smaller the dogs get. They incur a loss of vigor. They incur reproductive issues. Um, the dogs get smaller. There are just a lot of negative things that occur the more that you inbreed, line breed a dog. Okay, so so if I want my So if I want my dogs to look like my female, then I find me a stud that has a much lower COI of different bloodlines. Okay. And then I take those puppies and then I go back to the mom's side of the bloodlines and I line breed. Okay. So that's how you do that. um, Conversely, man, if I've got, you know, I mean, the same thing can work the other way around. When it comes to your stud, when it comes to maybe if you got the stud first, or you come to picking females for your stud and that kind of thing. Maybe you pick good quality females that don't have the same bloodline as your stud because your stud's got a 35% inbreeding coefficient, right? And you want the pups to look like him. You think he's so great. Now, keep this in keep this in mind. Um, Regardless of the bloodlines, regardless of the inbreeding coefficient, you cannot sacrifice on the quality of your females. All right, they need to be. Now, and look, I'm going to say this: you buy the best that you can afford. Okay, not everybody can buy in at the top. Not everybody can buy the best dog. Some of us just flat have um, financial constraints, right? Call it digging out of the dirt, however you want to call it, whatever. There are a lot of great dogs out there that if you've got a good eye, that you can find for not a lot of money. Okay. May not be big name dogs, right? And so then there's the rub with that. Most likely not going to be big name dog. It's going to be from a small breeder. Uh, right now, I'm a small breeder. Okay. Um, I got two females, that someone could pick up for $1,200. Grand champion sire, champion mom. I'm a small breeder. I'm not well known just yet, but I like to feel like I do know what I'm doing, and they're really nice pups. Okay, so um, So you may need to go to a smaller breeder that has good quality dogs for not a lot of money. Okay. Then you do the work. All right. Nothing wrong with you doing the work. You go earn it. Don't ride on the reputation of the stud owner or whatever, you go make if you have a good enough dog and you start and you take that dog to the show, your dog, you got to earn yours, right? And so uh, that's what I'm doing. I'm earning mine, you know. Um, my first female didn't have a champion daddy, didn't have a champion mama, wasn't from a big program. Uh, now she wasn't for me. She wasn't cheap, but then then I spent money. I sent her to a trainer, and that trainer that trainer showed her, uh, and she became a champion. And through that process, I learned, I watched, and so on. And then I became confident enough that to get my big ass out in the ring, right? And so the next dog I bought, I got on a co-own. A lot of I got the dog co-owned with Lance Lee, a grand champion John Wayne daughter, right? Beautiful dog. Now I picked her out, right? So you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good dog, but you do need to have a good eye, right? You do need to know what you're looking for. And if you don't have a really good eye, you need to read the standard. You need to you really need to know that with the standard when you go when it's time to pick a dog. And I'll tell you another thing about when it comes to oh god cramp, sorry, damn leg cramp. When it comes to picking puppies, there's a video on YouTube called The Puppy Puzzle. All right. It's about 48 minutes long. Okay. A couple um, basically accumulated data over selecting puppies for 20 years. All right. The attributes of puppies. And then they track these puppies as they got older, what they look like, how they turned out, so on, so on, so on. All right. So they came back, reformulated this about all the different traits and the things that are important when it comes to picking out puppies. But one of the things that they said is the best time to pick out a puppy is 8 weeks plus or minus 3 days. Okay. So when it comes time for you to go pick out a puppy, if it's a pup back, if it's your own litter, whatever it is, right? 8 weeks plus or minus 3 days is the time to pick those puppies. That's the best glimpse that you're going to get of what they're going to look like as a finished product. All right. We used to do the same thing in horses. The absolute best time to pick out a horse was 3 months. All right. Because then that horse for the next 2 years grew like a seesaw, right? And you just never got another glimpse. Okay. And so there's a time to pick them out. All right. And so go watch that video. It's called The Puppy Puzzle. It's on YouTube. Again, covers a lot of things, a lot of detail. Kind of like me, can be a little bit boring. All right. But the information is good. And so sometimes you got to sit through a little boredom to actually get some good information. All right. So go watch that video. But you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a great dog, but you do got to have a good eye. And look, if you don't trust your eye, then ask somebody to help you. There are plenty of people, myself included. If you said, "Hey, Jerry, will you come help me pick out a puppy?" Okay. I'd say, "Oh, yeah, I'll come help you." you know, uh, and then we'll go and, you know, we'll talk about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and then then we'll go pick out a puppy. I'll ask you a lot of questions, and then we'll go pick out a puppy. So, I went to Lance's house. I had my pick from two puppies. It was real close. They were both great puppies. Came down to very, very small minor things, right? Well, apparently I picked out the right dog because Janie champed out in 9 classes, right? 2 shows, what I call 2 events, so 4 shows each event. So 2 events, and then the first class of the 3rd event, she champed out. So did I get lucky, or did I just pick the right dog? I'll leave that up to you. But 2 out of the 3 females that I picked out have become champions. And Janie has her first win and towards grand champion. The other female that I picked out, she's super nice, but she kept getting beat by her litter mate, or not her litter mate, but a full sister of hers. And you know, you can show a dog a lot, and you can burn a lot of $20 bills getting seconds and third places. But you know, after 3 events, I decided that you know, she's just going to be a breeding dog, and that's okay. You know, she doesn't have the best front feet, but other than that, she's super nice. I understand why she wasn't winning. They're not super bad, but when you're in the classic class, your confirmation better be on point. And so, you know, I know why she got beaten. So that's that, and I'll be using her as a breeding dog. So, but so you don't have to spend a lot of money, but you do have to have a good eye, and it's not a bad idea to get some help, right? So reach out to people, ask people questions, you know, and they'll come help you out. But um, look, inbreeding coefficients are important. The other thing that I do when I start picking out dogs, when I start thinking about adding a dog, potential studs, is, you know, how does that dog fit into my program and the breedings that I want to do 3 generations into the future? Okay. Now, if you don't have software to do this, it's a fairly difficult thing to do. Which is one of the things that I do for people is I model. I can model your breeding program for you. Okay. I create. I just completed this 1 to 3 breeding. That was 16.92 with 13.91 coming from. Yeah, you know, Marquise, I saw you post that the other day, and yeah, 1 to 3. So what Marquise is saying, 1 to 3 is granddaughter to grandfather, right? So first and third generation. Okay, for me, that possibly a I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna do something right quick here. I want you guys to tell me if you can still see me, okay? So I switched over. Could you guys still see me? I flipped off for a minute, but let me know if you can still see me. Let's see. I'm not sure how to do this. You did still see me? Okay. Let's see. I wanna see something here. Picture in picture layout. Let's see. Shift 7. Oh, so I don't really know. Picture in picture layout. Let's see. New layout. No, no. Let's see. I was trying to figure out how to do something here right quick. Hang on, Marquise. I'm gonna check out something right quick. Um, so what I'm doing is I'm going to my I'm going to my software, and I'm looking at Lily, and under her breedings, I'm going to trial matings. Now, getting back to what Marquis said, when he did a 1 to 3, he got a 16. Would you say 16.92? So Marquise, when so when I take Lily back to her grandfather, uh, Grandsire has inbreeding coefficient 5.71. Lily's is 5.48, but the resultant litter, I get an inbreeding coefficient of 17.9. Okay. So mine's going to be a little bit higher than yours, Marquise. And a large part of yours came from your male, where I'm taking two dogs that have relatively low inbreeding coefficients of a little over 5, but the resultant breeding I get a little over, what did I say, 17, 18, something like that. Hang on a second, I got a message here. Let's see who's blowing up my phone. Image. Oh, Marquise was sharing some information. Let's see. Marquise sent me his stuff. 13.91. Yeah. Right. F equals 16.92 inbreeding calculator. Okay, right on. Right on. That's interesting. So, another one. I wish I could share this screen with you guys. I'm not sure, since this is new to me. I don't know how to I don't know how to share a screen, but I'll get that figured out. Banners, comments. So on a live stream, I'm guessing I probably can't share. Probably can't share another. Oh, wait a minute. Present. Hang on, guys. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you something. All right. So hang with me. All right. So you should be able to see right now. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and make this. Can you see this screen called where it says 365's Pretty Little Liar? Right. So did you see that screen? I think you did. I think you probably did. All right. Right on. All right. So here we go. Um, so we're going to go back to this. All right. So when I go to, so Tattletale was this breeding, right? And so we'll, hang on just a sec. Now, so you should be able to see this pedigree. All right, where it brings in, so you can see here that Pretty Little Liar is the granddaughter of 365's Tattletale. Okay, so my plan then is to take her back to 365's Tattletale, and we end up with um, the puppies end up with this pedigree. So you got Tattletale right here, and then of course then we're doubling up on we're doubling up on the sire's side, the grandsire side of the pedigree, which for me, I'm wanting to kind of wanting to increase the bistro here. So that's kind of where I'm running at, and you can see the inbreeding coefficient here of 17.9. So all right, so I'm gonna stop sharing that, get rid of that, get back over here. All right, so then the other thing would be, let's see, get back here. I'm gonna show another thing here where I'm considering doing this with Janie. Okay, I have modeled this now. Um, Typically, what I would say is a 1 to 3 breeding would be about as close as I want to go. Although I have modeled this and I am considering it. This is hang on a second, let me find it. All right, so this is um you guys can see this. This is Janie bred to a half brother. Okay. Now, ordinarily, I would not do um, half brother, half sister type stuff, but again, it depends on what the inbreeding coefficient ends up being. In this particular case, the inbreeding coefficient is 17.48. You can see my little mouse there, right? So for me, that's still under my 20%. Um, so a lot of whether or not you decide to do a whether or not you decide to um, do half siblings, if you will depend on the difference in their mothers. Okay, where Janie's mother and Bass Reeves' mom are very dissimilar. Okay, so you still end up with a very manageable uh, inbreeding coefficient, while at the same time I can uh, double up on John Wayne, Waffle House, so on, right? And so when I talk about inbreeding coefficients and why they're important, uh, you can kind of see that's really like one of the reasons, right? Uh, is like I ordinarily would never do half brother, half sister. Now, again, that's just me, right? The closest I would ordinarily do, like I said, is granddaughter to grandfather, right? Or as Marquis said, 1 to 3. All right. But in this particular case, it works out. So So that's kind of my, let's see, I've considered the half siblings as well. Same sour juice, totally different mamas. Started away from it, but I've been strongly considering it lately. Marquise, I don't think there's, again, I'm kind of like you. I kind of, you know, it just depends on how the numbers come out, right? And what, and what you're trying to do. But if the mamas are completely dissimilar now granted, look, they're probably not going to be dissimilar, say back 8th generation, 9th generation, on back, something like that. But if they're fairly dissimilar, um, COI is probably not going to be too high. Again, depending on your risk tolerance, but you look like sounds like you're probably okay with something in the 15 to 20% range. Again, I don't know everybody. Everybody's a little bit different, but so you know understanding your inbreeding coefficients are important. That way it helps you understand and mitigate any potential risk that you might run into. Okay. But then the bigger thing becomes, you model COIs, you pick your dogs, you do your things. But the important thing to think about too is when if you're a serious breeder and you're thinking about, you're building your yard and what am I going to do? How am I going to build my yard, right? You got to ask yourself when you add a dog, when you're adding another dog, what bloodlines do you want to feature? What type of dog do you really like? And is that dog, right? Does that dog mix in with the others, right? Do their bloodlines complement the other bloodlines that you have in your program? So when you model 3 generations down, 3 generations out, 4 generations out, what do things look like? So again, I have the ability to do that, and I do that to make sure that uh, you know that my inbreeding coefficients stay in the range that I want them to stay. I want healthy dogs, right? uh, i I embark test all my breeding dogs. We do hips, we elbows, with hearts. I want to make sure that I got good dogs, but the higher that inbreeding coefficient goes, the more risk I bring into things. Okay. And so, responsible breeding just kind of brings in, those particular responsibilities and understanding those risks and those factors. Okay. Um, Another thing, what you will find, just since I brought it up, inbreeding coefficients, software based, genetically based. Okay. Um, Say I do a COI for you and it says 10%, and you get your embark test results back and it says 20%. Like, well, Jerry, well, why is that higher? Okay. Well, obviously, there's no way your software can predict what actually happens when the during the recombinant process of DNA, right? And how those chromosomes line up and the loci on each chromosome that carry those genes, that carry those traits, and how they get merged together, right? Only a DNA test can do that. And so there's no way to predict what's going to happen. So almost always your genetic COI is going to be higher than what it is on paper because we're looking at names. It's actually dealing with the real genetics of the dog. I mean, one particular trait could have been carried forward from a dog 200 years ago, and this particular time, when it recombined and everything, that particular trait decides to show up. That's how sometimes every now and then, right? You get a dog that's got real big, tall, pointy ears. I had a dog like that, and I had a dog like that in this litter. Uh, his registered name is Dubtown Mr. Spock. That boy had some ears on him. Now I'm like, where the hell did them ears come from? Well, they probably came back from many generations ago. There was probably a bull terrier in there with big old tall ass ears. I mean, they stood straight up, right? So those things happen, right? And so it's the same way with genetic traits and so on. So your genetic COI is going to almost always be higher than any COI that I might do for you. The difference is that when we look at COIs, we also look at the influences of the different lines, right? Is the high COIs, because what we can do is kind of look at the probabilities of which line in the pedigree is most apt to pass along its particular traits. Again, no guarantees, but if the sire's female line carries real strong inbreeding, right, and the sire's was fairly weak, more than likely, first of all, your sire probably looks more like the mom than it did the dad. And then, second of all, when you go to breed that dog's probably going to produce more like its mom, right, than it would its dad. But you wouldn't know that based on a genetic COI. You would only know that by breaking down the pedigree and looking, seeing where the inbreeding was taking place and what the COIs were on each line as you go back through the pedigree. And so that's one of the advantages of paper inbreeding coefficient analysis versus genetic. But again, like most things in breeding, um, none of this stuff is an exact science. But that's part of the fun. That's part of the art. That's part of kind of just part of the journey, right? Um, but I guess the other thing that I would probably say, is lean on other people that are more experienced. Ask reputable breeders questions. If you're really serious about it and you ask them good questions and relaying to them what you're trying to accomplish, and then when you get that information, because here's the thing that you don't want to do, right? Is you don't want to come to a breeder, an experienced breeder, take up their time and everything and have them go through a bunch of things and then completely disregard all of the information that they gave you and go do something completely different than what they tried to lay on you, right? Where they tried to guide you. That's the quickest way to lose. I feel like quickest way to ensure that you don't get help from that person ever again, right? Um, and look, some people you just can't tell anything. But if you come to a breeder, if you come correct and they know that you're serious, I'm pretty sure that most of the breeders, uh, in the bully breed here, are going to give you a hand. You know, And I know I'll pretty much, if you're serious, I know I'll help anybody. And look, again, I'm not an experienced bully breeder, okay? But I know a little bit about genetics. I do a lot of research, and I did breed horses for uh, about 11 years, I guess, And so genetics are genetics, breeding is breeding. I had somebody tell me one time, well, these are dogs. Well, bullshit. All right. Genetics are genetics. Genetic outcomes are genetic outcomes. Phenotypes are phenotypes. Genotypes are genotypes. So on and so on and so on. I don't care if it's dogs, cattle, people. Same principles apply. Same science applies. All right. And so now there are a lot of myths, things like that come from uh, uh, every genus, that you deal with. Okay. All the horse guys, they got their sayings and they got their myths and their old wives' tales and everything, and the same thing in dogs and so on. And it's all a bunch of garbage. You know, yeah, it used to be true because there was no other way to disprove it, but now we have DNA analysis, we have gene mapping, all the technology and everything. Um, so a lot of those myths have been dispelled, but they do still persist. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to be wrapping this up here in a minute, but anyway, so when it comes to my strategy, for breeding and selecting dogs and things like that, those are really the important things, right? Phenotype, genotype, right? Making sure your inbreeding coefficients are within what you consider to be your risk tolerance. I'm never going to tell anybody you ought to be here. Keep in mind, science says 10% or below. Science really says below 10%. Okay. Preferably 5% or below. But it's not, if you want your breeding program to be consistent, you just got to be a little bit, I feel like you got to be a little bit higher than that. But you got to come in, you got to come in and out of that. You can't, I say you can't, you can, you shouldn't, in my opinion, consistently breed, your dogs with high inbreeding coefficients the entire time. Go out, lower the COI, bring in new genetics, then line breed again. Go out, line breed again, right? Um, Got to be careful with that. The other thing is when you're breeding high COIs, you need to have really good, healthy dogs. You need to understand the health and everything behind those dogs. They need to be really good specimens. Minimize expression of negative traits, negative health issues, things like that. So, uh, I guess I'll get up here and say, look, if you got any questions about those things, hit me up. Happy to analyze, take a look at your potential mating and give you a quote on what a COI analysis will cost. It ranges anywhere from $25 to $75, depending on how much work is involved. If I don't have any of the dogs in the database, it can take me 6, 7 hours to put that all together. But you'll get a pedigree that has the inbreeding coefficients of all the dogs in 5 generations there. Then there's also a report called an ancestor analysis report. There's typically about 2,000 dogs in a 10-generation analysis. You'll get a breakdown of every one of those dogs on the ancestor analysis report, and that comes with the inbreeding coefficient of every dog in that analysis, where there's enough information to do so. It also tells you of course, all the dogs in the pedigrees, the generation in which they appeared, how many times in the generation they appeared, total count, so on, so on. So there's a lot of information that's useful in breaking down, your breedings, things like that. So if you need some assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Happy to help however I can. Uh, I appreciate you guys sitting through this little kind of test run, if you will. Not done the multi-platform streaming and that kind of thing using StreamYard. Um, wasn't sure how things were going to work, but it looks like everything's worked okay. So look, as always, I appreciate you everybody watching. It's always a pleasure to get to interact with you guys. Sorry you couldn't see my answer to the comments. I got to try to figure that out. Let me check with something here. This says private chat. That says everyone chat in the studio. There's comments, but show. Oh, okay. So that's where you can show the comment over there. But this says can't post comments to some destinations. So I'll figure, let's see, read post, YouTube, Facebook, post, groups, info. Okay, so says, okay. So I just saw, let's see what it says. Why not? Okay, so here's why you could not see my post. Uh, you guys need to go to StreamYard.com/Facebook. StreamYard will ask to access their Facebook name and picture. If they accept, future comments will show their name and picture. So, in order for you to be able to see my answers to your comments, you need to go and accept StreamYard through your Facebook page, and then you'll be able to see my answers because I'm streaming multi platform from and through StreamYard. So that's why you couldn't see my answers, but you can see them on YouTube. So, also, yep, for those of you who don't know, I do now have a YouTube page, Dubtown Bullies on YouTube. Feel free to check me out over there. I'm going to try to get on. And now that I'm doing multi-platform, probably do it a little bit more often, at least lives. We'll get on there and we can interact and things like that. So anyway, look, guys, as always, I appreciate you guys coming on and hanging out with me for a while and participating. It's always good to get to talk to talk to the folks, and I wish you success in your breedings. And like I said, if I can help out in any way, don't hesitate to hit me up. You guys have a great night, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.